Hey Boo Buddies, welcome to another Draw With Me video. Today I am working in watercolor and I'm actually starting with some masking fluid. So what masking fluid is used for is creating a seal on the paper so that when you paint with a heavy wash of watercolor, it doesn't affect all of the paper and you can maintain some white and go back with a lighter color later on. I'm actually using 3 washes and for this painting, the first being a mix of ultramarine and cobalt blue. And I was struggling with keeping the moisture on this painting when I was just getting started, so I only have round brushes, but I really should have used a flat brush to get this wash a bit more uniform for such a big space. This piece of paper is 10 inches by 10 inches. And it's just a lot of space to go in a pretty dry room that I was working in with such a round brush. Next, I am using more masking fluid to prepare the middle third of the painting for the second wash. I'm working a bit more on the foreground with the masking fluid of what the characters in this painting will look like. The middle wash is much lighter than actually any of the other parts of this painting. It's a combination of cardamom yellow, Goldberg hue, and raw umber, and sap green. Mixed unevenly to give a organic grassy look. So right now I'm mostly going in with the lightest part, which is mostly just the cardamom yellow and the Goldberg to give a strong golden autumn yellow botanical feel. And then I will go back in adding the sap green and the raw umber colors to do more line work and give the texture of the field that I am painting. So one of the things about using masking fluid, and a lot of artists choose not to use it just because it can be really tricky, is you can't leave it and you need to get it off. And it requires this rubber tool to help pull it off. And it comes off like rubber cement. And then we can get back to painting other things as we need, and then just have a careful hand around what we don't want to get color on until we're ready. This middle section was actually very challenging because, first of all, again, I was working in a very dry room, and working with watercolor in a dry area is just always going to be frustrating to work with because the paper just kind of absorbs the moisture really fast. But doing the background and then adding in the texture and then going back to add depth to this area took a couple sessions of working on this painting. This total painting I spent about 4 days doing everything, just letting everything dry and coming back. And now that I pretty much have the background done, it's time to work on the foreground and the characters that are in this painting. And it's pretty obvious the silhouette that was used with the masking tape, and now I'm starting to fill it in. So I used the same colors as the grass in the background for the body of this monster. The only difference is I added Van Dyke brown and took out the cardamom yellow, and I went really heavy on the browns and then used the yellows for highlights and the sap green for lowlights. So as I go through this painting, there's a lot of colors repeated and mixed differently to get different features of the background versus the character, but so that it all looks like it's cohesive. For the pumpkin stem and pumpkin shading, I added hooker green to my sap green to give it more of a fresh look, but also to make it stand out a little bit more so that it pops a little harder in the foreground than getting muddy with the other colors. For the pumpkin flesh, I used cardamom orange, and then again used a similar blend with the same yellows that I was already using, and just going back in with the raw umber and sap green for some shading to give some depth of shape, as well to give it that looking like a pumpkin and not just orange blobs. You'll notice I did not use masking fluid for the face of the monster, and that is because my masking fluid is blue, and the reason to use blue masking fluid instead of white or clear masking fluid is so you can see it to pick it up. But because it's blue, if it leaves a residue, then it would actually be darker than where I want the face, and I didn't want to risk that, so we had to just use a very fine brush and be very careful. Whereas where I used the masking fluid before, paint was going over it, and it was going to be darker than any residue that may or may not get left. But that residue is also another reason why a lot of artists choose not to use masking fluid. So now the little boy gets his face, and to do his skin tone, I mixed cardamom red with cardamom yellow, and then a lot of water to get some skin tone shade. And this was a new technique I'd never tried before, so I was a little apprehensive and excited, but once I got it to look kind of the way I was hoping for, then I was pretty happy. For his hair, I almost echoed the monster's body in colors except for the green. I left out all the greens, and so he was raw umber and Van Dyke brown, which is the same that I used for the monster's body, and then just a little bit of the Goldberg for highlights to give it a hair look. We wanted it to look like dark hair. His trousers are the ultramarine blue that I used in the sky without adding cobalt, so that it echoes the colors but isn't exact to the colors. And then his shirt is a mix of the two greens that I used for the pumpkin stem. And so you'll see that I am absolutely echoing the colors used on the monster are being used differently, but still being used the same or being echoed on the boy. For the final wash, I used just straight Van Dyke brown and raw umber with the ultramarine blue that I used in the sky to give it a very dirt look. So it's what's actually giving it that gray texture and making the browns in the ground look more like mud and less like plant life. And then same with the line work, I just added more blue, and I just kept going in until I had a nice ground texture. Now I'm adding the details on the little boy and giving him a little bit of shading and I'm using just the finest tip of a brush and using the colors from his hair to shade his face, and then the same color as his pants, the ultramarine blue, mixed with the puddle that I made for the dirt to do his eye, so that he doesn't just have a blue dot in the middle of his face but actually looks like an eye. I did the same thing to give him some fingers and make him look like, he's not just watercolor impressionism but actually a full character. And then I went into the ground with the 2 yellows that I used earlier in the grass to add in some detailed grass to make it look like this is part of the same field with just a clearing in the maze of this field. And now there's some grass growing around. And the final touch that I went in, and it's the only place I actually use this color, is I used canary yellow to give the pumpkin monster a little bit of highlights around his eyes and mouth, so that there is a bit of a glow coming from within his pumpkin head. And that is how I make a pumpkin monster in a corn maze with watercolor. Thank you for watching, Boo Buddies, and I hope you enjoyed this first spooky of the year draw with me.